Okay? So this is the second part of the workshop. And in this part, we're going to have a more specific discussion on the reading set itself. Ms. Marks presented information on the WP in general, how one submits a portfolio, and also gave you tips on how to prepare to answer the question for this particular reading set. So what we're going to do now is really look at the readings and have a discussion in terms of, you know, if we take a position, how do we support that position and all that. So I start by looking at the question, okay? And the question, of course, we read it before, so I don't have to repeat it, but the question has several parts, I argue. So, okay? So I asked the question, how many parts does this question have? Anyone? How many parts does this question have? If you have it in front of you, can you tell me that it has parts, or if you, yes?
It has two.
Two parts.
Oh, it does.
Six.
Well,
6 parts. It's like an auction. All right, I'll give you the right answer. So far, I have not gotten the right answer, but it doesn't really matter. Being wrong doesn't mean that you're not going to write a good essay. Were you counting, or? All right. All right. Well, the answer is, okay, that it has 3 parts, as far as I'm concerned. There are 3. Now remember, everything I say here, I'm not 100% right. I'm saying 3 parts, but that's my understanding of the question. Remember, you'll say, well, you're the, doesn't matter what authority I might have, I am a reader just like you. So my reading of something may be different from yours, but that doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. So please, like Ms. Marks told you earlier, you know, you have to think on your own. You have to make your own assumptions. You have to trust your own understanding of the readings too. So, okay, so what are these 3 parts? So what I did was I snipped the question from the PDF file and I put it on this slide. So to me, the first 2 sentences consist of 1 part, and that gives you an idea of what each one of the authors says about the 2 authors that we're concerned about, Broman and Coe. So these 2 authors have positions, and of course their positions are important in writing this essay. So in a way, we're just giving you like a little preview of what the arguments are, some background information. Now the second part of the question is, your essay should briefly summarize the debate between Coe and Broman. The key word here is briefly summarize the arguments, okay? What does brief mean?
short.
Okay,
Concise.
on a page, how much of a page or the 5 pages should this
Probably
brief?
like a third.
I'm sorry?
A third of a page.
Yeah, very good. You know, a third of a page, no more. We always worry that students, when they see this dirty word, summary, because this is the thing you do not want to do, summarizing beyond the bit that you need to do in order to give your reader an idea of what you're talking about, some background, right? Just like in the question, we gave you a little bit of background. Well, in your essay, you have to give some background. But the assumption is that we have read the material. We know the material. This is not an essay where you are informing us, that you're giving us information. You are answering the question. And that's the key to passing the WP. Understanding that the purpose of your essay is to answer the question. Okay? So, in many ways I can argue that the first part of this question is a brief summary of the debate. Okay? And I'm not saying just copy it and you're all set, you've done your summary, but as you rightly argued, no more than a third of a page. Or maybe, I mean, even if it's a page, remember, sometimes we need to look at things physically, right? It's a 5-page essay. You have a lot of stuff to write about. If you do 2 pages of summary, and we're grading you on the 8 elements of writing proficiency, right? And summary is, if you look at our grading rubric, you're not going to see summary mentioned too many times, except as, you know, it's a necessity at times. If that summary takes more than 1 page, well then your essay has less chances of meeting the other elements, which include evaluation of the arguments, right? Sustaining a thesis, organizing an essay that sustains a thesis, because you are arguing in this essay, or you're supporting a position in this essay. Whichever way you go, you need to support that position. So the final part is referring to at least 2 other authors in the reading set, 2 other authors, right? So the question tells you how much of the reading set to use. Broman and Coe, you cannot ignore one or the other, and then 2 other authors. If we look at the reading set, it has 6 essays. Well, 5 essays and a little snippet from de Tocqueville. Okay, so take a position on the debate. Is American exceptionalism a set of pure virtues? And who argues that? Broman, right? Or is it both good and bad? Coe. Remember, Broman is not saying that it's all bad. It's good and bad. There are aspects of American exceptionalism that are good. And in his essay, he points it out, and when we get to it, we'll talk about it. But in your essay, be very careful not to say that Coe says it's all bad, because, I mean, it's right there. We are quoting him. He says it's both good and bad, okay? So let's say if you go against Coe, at least you can say, look, you know, he says, you know, it has good aspects. And so I agree with Broman, because Broman is right for so many reasons. Of course, you cannot say he's right because I think so. He's right because he has good reason for writing so. So, next step. So one of the things I do is, and sort of what I'm doing is I'm modeling the way that I would approach reading critically in preparation to write an essay. First, I need to understand what the question is, make sure I get it, make sure that while I'm reading, I'm keeping in mind that I have to do certain things. One of the reasons I do that is because for a 5-page essay based on 20 pages, although you have probably written 5-page essays that are based on hundreds of pages, but when you look at one of the authors, Coe, it's a lot of information, a lot of pages. My last count was what, 6 to 7 pages, and not only 6 to 7 pages, but very packed with information. in fact, packed with key terms that you talked about earlier with Ms. Marks. He has so many tables, so many lists, so much information. What are you going to do? Okay, so I went a little bit ahead of myself, but when I look at a table of contents, I'm trying to figure out, this is assuming you haven't not read anything. So you're looking at the table of contents, and I try to determine, okay, what's the gist of the argument? Is this guy pro? Is this guy against? What is this particular author? What does the title of his essay tell me about whether he's for American exceptional, the argument that America is exceptional, or is he against it? Well, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote From Democracy in America. Well, that title, he didn't write From Democracy in America, he wrote Democracy in America. Well, that title doesn't tell me anything, but I have read Alexis Tocqueville, so I know that he was not really, he didn't really like the idea. Okay? So, but if I had never read, I have no idea. I have no idea whether he's pro-American exceptionalism or against. Now, Dennis Phillips asked the question, is America an exceptional nation? Well, it's a question without an answer. I have no idea. But at least he's going to explore that. The only tidbit, and that's because I pay attention to such things, I noticed that his, although he's on ABC, and I'm not sure whether it's ABC, our network.
Australian Broadcast System.
Yes, exactly. I was getting to that. I noticed that the address has an AU at the end, and that indicates Australia. Okay? So if he's an Australian, and he's asking the question, is America an exceptional nation, I would imagine he would not be supportive of this idea. He's probably critiquing it. Okay? The next one, Ron Jacobs, American Exceptionalism, a Disease of Conceit. Is he supporting America? Is he saying, yes, America is an exceptional nation or not? Right? I mean, a disease. He's using a very strong term. Conceit, even stronger, right? So he's telling us, we don't know who he is, because we haven't read the little bibliographical blurbs yet, but blurbs or burbs. So, I mean, he's pretty much saying it's a disease. Americans who hold on to this idea are conceited. The nation is conceited. So I can say against. Martin Sellebold, a look at American exceptionalism from the Australian rationalist. What do you think? Another Australian, right? And the rationalist. Do you know anything about rationalist? Just from the word. You know, if someone is rational, I mean, even if I didn't know a lot about rationalists, right? Isn't he going to put this idea to the test? Because to assume that America is the country that God, that God deemed the greatest in the world, well, a rationalist would say that's irrational, right? So I'm thinking. I haven't read a word yet, I'm thinking. And here we go. I know what the next two authors' main argument is, right? I know that Coe says it's good, it's both good and bad, and I know that Vroman is the guy who says, no, it's based on this set of, pure virtues. So he's the one who says, of course we're an American exceptional. I mean, we are exceptional. All right. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because we have to choose who we're going to use beyond Coe and Vroman, right? Well, you can choose Alexis de Tocqueville because we didn't specify in the question, although it's just a paragraph, You can say that's one of the essays I use, and we're not going to say a word. You know, yes,
Like, all right, so we don't know if he agrees or doesn't agree?
if we read it, we'll find out. We don't know from the title, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
See,
no, from the title.
yeah, that's what I'm arguing. From the title, I have no idea. But, so, the thing is, based on my position, do I have any support for a position that says that, yes, American exceptionalism is, you know, based on a set of pure virtues, right? If I were to agree with Ted Broman, would I have support for my position?
Maybe in Phillips.
I think in the top.
A little bit from Phillips, perhaps? Okay? But certainly, we would not, we don't know. We don't really know. But it seems like the tide is against you. You know, you can, the thing is, you have to be practical. This is an academic exercise. This is beyond what you think. Do you understand that? You are evaluating arguments, you're writing an essay, taking a position based on your evaluation of arguments. You may not even know anything about the topic. So when you decide on your position, you have to kind of weigh how much you have that will support your answer. Yes?
So like, the Tocqueville does say that it's like puritanical origin and exceptional, so like he does agree, right? Like,
Which one again?
so the Tocqueville, he sort of does agree by saying that it's like a puritanical origin, so like, he'd be good to use alongside with Roman, right?
Okay.
You know what I
You
mean?
think so?
Well, I mean, if he's saying that it's pure, like Roman is.
Do you think that one paragraph will give you enough support in a 5-page essay?
No.
What does he say at the very end? What does he say? What is the last line?
Let us cease then to view all democratic nations under the example of the American people.
What does that mean?
Opposite.
Right? Is that like saying, yeah, let's all be like Americans? What is he saying at the very end?
Let us cease means let's stop.
Yeah. And stop what?
Stop that democracy that America has been working apparently to him.
Okay. I don't know, but the way I interpret that sentence, I would, you know, from one paragraph, you can't really, see, I'm assuming I have not read the book. I have no idea. I'm a student, I only have one paragraph from his book, and basically, what I know is de Tocqueville came up with that term, that America's an exceptional nation, and we picked up on it. But if you read that book, you may find out that he says that, but America being exceptional is not such a great compliment as one would think. Yes?
So basically, they all define exceptionalism in
Yes,
their own
yes.
terms. And our job is to stick to one of those definitions and prove why it is
Yeah.
either right or wrong,
Yeah.
correct?
I mean, the definitions are pretty much the same. What is American exceptionalism? But in terms of whether it's good or bad is what you're working on.
What entails.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, anyway, I don't want to spend any more time on this, but, you know, so based on your readings, you need to think a little bit if in your heart you say America's number one, if in your heart you say God made America number one, do you understand that? If that's what you feel in your heart, well, in this essay, you need proof based on the reading set and not why you think America is the greatest country on earth. Okay? Now, because of the time limitation, I will focus only on Co. And I'll take you through Co in more detail, but you can use that as a model in your readings for everybody else. So you're writing an analytical essay. And an analytical essay has parts. Okay? Does anyone know what the parts of an analytical essay are?
Is it thesis, evidence,
Conclusion.
Thesis, evidence,
Conclusion.
conclusion?
forget it.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, I mean that's the heart of it. I mean those are the three most important parts, right? A thesis, evidence for that thesis, right, and a conclusion. Well, I mean this is my little list, and it's a very broad list, but I argue that an essay, an analytical essay, introduces a problem. You're writing an analytical essay, and what you are introducing is a debate. You're introducing an argument between these two people, right? Now, the next part is to describe how the problem manifests itself, which can include a history, real-life examples, etc. Then you propose a solution. In your case, you will propose what? Are you going to find a solution? Are you going to solve the debate? What are you going to do? What will you propose? The big word, the really big word in essay writing of this type.
Thesis?
Yeah.
Your last part.
Yeah, I mean, your solution is, well, look, based on my reading, so-and-so is correct. Or so-and-so makes a better argument than so-and-so. There's no law that says you cannot say, look, parts of what Broman is saying are correct, parts of what Coe are correct. I am not quite convinced. I can't really take a definite position. Yes?
We just heard from Mrs. Marks that we should state who fails in this debate and why.
Well, she gave you samples. What Ms. Marks gave you were samples of how, to answer the question, okay? And I think, I remember that conversation. Remember, she just gave you examples, how to phrase it. But, I would argue that based on the evidence, the best answer, the best position is to say, Coe is correct in arguing that it's good and bad. Based on the evidence of the reading set, if I wrote Broman is correct, I have very little support for that argument. And the danger in that, it's not that it cannot be done, but we have not given you the information for it. We have not given you evidence for it. Do you see that? So it's that's kind of how I feel about it. Now, describe how the solution would help solve the problem using supporting evidence, which is really the heart of your argument. Okay? And, of course, another thing you need to do is to acknowledge opposing views and debunk them. And, of course, if you support Coe, you have to bring up Broman and say, well, you have to get in more detail. Why is Broman's argument weak in relation to Coe's, right? Or some of the other authors. And in the end, conclude. So if you have to do this in your own essay, one way to approach a close reading of the essays that you're using as sources is to kind of look at them the same way. They're analytical essays. Do they follow this pattern? Okay, so I'm looking at Harold Coe's America's Jekyll and Hyde Exceptionalism. And I said, okay, how close does he get? Well, does he identify the problem? The evidence for that is on page 11, and where he says, from these twin perspectives, I now see the term American exceptionalism has been used far too loosely and without meaningful nuance. When we talk about American exceptionalism, what precisely do we mean?
He states in his title clearly that it's a Jekyll and Hyde. It's a one person who has been confused. It's called dissociative personality disorder. It means two people live in one body.
But read this paragraph carefully. What is, if not the main problem, what's one of the problems? I mean, yeah, you're right. But because he's talking about duality, right? He says, during the last 15 years, I've had a special opportunity to look at American exceptionalism from both sides. I almost feel like singing the song from both sides now. You're all too young to remember the song that I'm talking about. But not just from the perspective of the academy and the human rights world, but from two distinctive vantage points within the human rights arena. From one angle as a human rights scholar and non-governmental advocate, from another as a U.S. government official. So he's had a foot in one and a foot in the other. So he has experienced this concept from being a human rights activist or scholar and being on the government side, okay? So from these twin perspectives, I now see the term itself, American exceptionalism, has been used far too loosely and without meaningful nuance, okay? When we talk about American exceptionalism, what precisely do we mean? Do you see that? So his argument is very nuanced. I mean, he says, it's too loose. The way we see American exceptionalism, we're too loose with it, and we don't have any meaningful nuance. Let me give it some nuance here. Because what in the world do we mean when we say American exceptionalism? He thinks that the term itself is not well defined, okay? So that's one thing that he says.
So this is his thesis.
Yeah, I think that's the thesis. I think what he tries in this entire essay is to, I may be wrong. Am I wrong, Ms. Marks? Maybe. Do you see that? Because what was I telling you earlier? It's not bad. It's not all bad. It's not all good. What in the world do we mean by it? And because there's this conflict that we don't really, our definition is too loose and without meaningful nuance, that's what results in its being bad and its being good. Do you see that? So, now you may find that, he says more. I just picked that paragraph. To me, that's the most interesting paragraph. Now, I also want to point out to you that this paragraph is a little bit, my seeing this as the central thesis is a little bit more nuanced. Do you know what I mean? But there's plenty in this essay where you're not going to go wrong. But I think that, to me, that's the problem. Okay, so the next thing he does is to describe how the problem manifests itself. Loose use of the term, right? That's the problem. Well, he has two sections, the phases of American exceptionalism, and the next section, entrenching exceptionalism. Now, they're very detailed. As you go through the readings, I'm sure you know there are a lot of terms. 3 phases, 4 problems, 5 this, 4 of those. It's like, oh, we're going to get lost, right? There's just too much info, but too much information in this to use it all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly, and this is what I was trying to say to Ms. Marks. Is this like something I have to address in the 5-page and scatter myself
Oh, no, no,
all over the
if-
place? Because I can only focus on one single of those definitions. And
Yeah, I mean, when I look at these two sections, the way I see them in very, you know, like, my bird's eye view of the sections is, you know, well, Faces of American Exceptionalism is sort of how it manifests itself, you know, different ways that it manifests itself, what different people say, what the problem is, blah, 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 blah. Entrenching exceptionalism is more focused, more detailed. It's like an example that focuses on the Bush Doctrine and how American foreign policy is shaped by this loosely defined term.
So it's more closer to his thesis.
Well, no, neither one is far or close to the thesis. You know, I don't think that's the issue, but for this workshop, I'm only focusing on Faces of American Exceptionalism, not to say that the other one isn't important, but there's just too much information. You can, if you want to focus on entrenching, how the Bush administration was affected by this loose, this term whose definition is very loose, and how their policies were bad or good, right? Because of it, then that's fine. But I think the Faces of American Exceptionalism is kind of the umbrella. Entrenching exceptionalism is sort of a subset of what he's saying, but focusing on one specific American foreign policy. Yeah. Okay? So, all right, so the Faces of American Exceptionalism. What are these faces, right? The reason I'm asking that question, what are these faces? You have to write an essay that is using a lot of information. You're trying to figure out ways to organize it. If you choose to organize the essay by the way the readings appear in the reading set, you're not going to pass the WP. You know what I mean? Alexis de Tocqueville, author number 2, author number 3. You'll never get anywhere. Of course, the question helps you, and you bring Broman, but within, you need to, one way to organize an essay of this kind is perhaps to use the key terms. And there's so many here, you can pick and choose. You don't have to use all the key terms, but I argue you can shape your essay based on, all right, done. Does anyone else say anything about it? I mean, you know, remember the grid that Ms. Marks shows you. You can use the questions that Coe asks, which is a very good organization strategy, or you can go, you know, do something different. But it has to be organized. It has to be organized not by author, but by ideas, by arguments. So, now, he quotes Michael Ignatieff, okay, who identified 3 faces. And one of the 3 faces is American exemptionalism. The second one is legal self-sufficiency, and the third one is double standards. So he's quoting someone else. What he's doing is he's bringing in a source, right, to say, look, this is something that, you know, Michael Ignatieff, which he agrees with. And of course, I asked the question, is he satisfied with the list? Well, yes and no, right? Because he goes on to
Places emphasis on this.
yeah,
the most.
okay. It's not that he critiques, I mean, he agrees with Ignatieff, but he says double standards is the most problematic phase. So why? I ask myself why.
Because
Okay.
they apply, like you said, foreign policy is the issue. You know, they apply
Yeah.
one standard to issues abroad and another standard to domestic.
Because American exceptionalism at home is one thing, but American exceptionalism to an Egyptian abroad is something else. Some of us who are from foreign countries know how we have seen the face of American exceptionalism. But please don't write an essay about how, I can write my whole essay on how American exceptionalism caused, I'm from Greece, we had 7 years of a dictatorship, we suffered, and we are still trying to figure that out, and that's because the CIA, put in a few army colonels to overtake our government. If you start that, you'll never pass this essay. Although we will appreciate your emotional, attachment to it. So when you look at pages 11, on pages 11 to 13, he explains why the double standard is the most problematic. More problematic than American exemptionalism, right? And the other one I just forgot.
Flying buttresses.
Yeah. So what the double standard causes is the U.S. finds itself associating with horrid bedfellows. By having a double standard, then other countries who are doing horrible things, sometimes the United States is forced to associate with them. Okay? The U.S. finds itself condoning or defending human rights abuses of those bedfellows. Okay? And if you follow current affairs, and you're following the ISIS issue, the ISIS group, and how it's, taking over Syria and parts of Iraq, you will understand why. The United States often finds itself trying to defend people who are human rights abusers because of the double standard. Now, the U.S.'s moral authority is weakened. Okay? Have you heard a recent argument of someone who argues against the United States on moral grounds? Do you know of a recent event? And the reason I'm doing that, the reason I'm bringing that up is, people say, well, what? Can I bring in my own experience? It's okay up to a point. I mean, remember, we had major conflicts. Ukraine, Syria, Palestine, right? Israel and Palestine. Now ISIS. Syria is now been involved in this too, but is it possible that someone has stood up and said, you can't talk? When the United States talks about genocide, do you know what the Nazis said? Who are you talking? You wiped out an entire race of people, almost, with the American Indians. You see that? The United States, unfortunately, this double standard makes it difficult for us to be an upstanding human rights defender because we ourselves have condoned and supported atrocities. So, and the U.S. ends up undermining the legitimacy of the rules themselves. And then I write, but wait, there's more, okay? Am I going too fast? I mean, I can't go paragraph by paragraph. I'm just giving you sort of not an outline, but glimpses into the reading set, because basically what you need to do is pick the things you need. Pull them out, just like that grid that Ms. Marks showed you. What is that? That's pulling out information, so you can refer to it, so you can start thinking in more general terms of how you're going to shape your essay. You need to go beyond the readings at some point and start writing your essay. Okay? So here it is, there's more. Now, he says that there's a fourth much overlooked dimension, okay, which is genuinely exceptional in international affairs. There is one aspect of American, of this concept of American exceptionalism for which the United States, and that's why I put it all up there so you can see, exceptional global leadership. The United States has many times exercised exceptional global leadership, right? To this day, he argues the United States remains the only superpower capable and at times willing to commit real resources and make real sacrifices to build, sustain, and drive an international system committed to international law. America has been exceptional, he argues, right? Okay? So when the United States is right, when it leads, when it does follow, when its global leadership is exceptional, other countries follow. Now, we may not all agree with Kosovo, but we all agree with Nuremberg. How many of us really know much about Kosovo, right? Nuremberg are the trials for the Nazi genocide, the Holocaust, where they tried the perpetrators of that atrocity. So, and then, when the United States does not lead, often nothing happens. Or worse yet, as in Rwanda and Bosnia, disasters occur because the United States does not get involved. Okay? So, and then he uses two anecdotes. Remember, we talked about personal experiences from his own experience. An anecdote from the time that he was Assistant Secretary of State. And then proposed, so although I overlooked, I'm not discussing the other part, entrenching exceptionalism. I don't want you to ignore it. I just, for the sake of time, I can't really go into it. Now, propose a solution. Does he propose a solution? Well, that whole section, responding to American exceptionalism, is his proposal. Yes, there's a way. There's a way to fix this problem. What he does is he says, well, other solutions are, number one, triumphalism or getting used to it. People who say, we're the best. They're jealous of us. They just have to get used to it. We won the battle, right? Criticize the critics. Say, well, they're exaggerating. They have an axe to grind or whatever. The next one is locate the causes of American exceptionalism. Try to figure, try to kind of, where is it? What causes them to think that they're exceptional? And then trigger transnational legal process. And of course, which of these four is the one that he thinks will solve the problem? Yeah, the last one. Okay, he argues in order for the United States to clearly define itself as exceptional, right, it has to trigger transnational legal process. It has to become a member of the international community that stands on, that supports the rule of law and stops breaking the law.
But
Yes.
his solution, what do you want us to do? Agree or disagree with his
Well, if
solution?
you agree with him,
Propose my own?
yeah, this is sort of kind of how he develops his argument.
So my job is to agree with that or disagree?
Well, yeah, because you say, oh, well, yeah, if you're agreeing with him, I know what you mean. These are the four, he gives us four solutions. Can you think of another one?
I'll propose my own.
Can you?
Well, not of it for a second, but if I think about that, I can, I guess.
But if you propose your own in the essay, how would you violate one of the elements of writing proficiency? Is it possible that if you propose your own?
It seems like I will satisfy one of them.
Okay,
This is what you want me to do, according to previous slides.
okay.
Propose solution, you just don't.
No, I know, but what we said earlier, by proposing a solution, what did we say? Your position, you know, we have to change the terms. This is critical reading of an analytical essay. It's not writing an analytical essay. Do you understand that? We're not answering a question here, are we? We're exploring, we are searching for the material that we need in order to write our essay. Do you see that? So, no. Oh, now I understand your question. You know, before I didn't really understand your question, that you have to propose your own solution. No. You have to take a position. In a sense, that's your solution. If I can just take that word out of the picture in terms of what you need to do, okay? So we know he prefers transnational, you know, and he says, that brings me to the fourth possible response, one that he proposes. Under my argument, the real cost of American exceptionalism comes when USA insistence upon double standards. In crude terms, bad exceptionalism diminishes or inhibits its capacity to display exceptional leadership, blah, 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 okay? And he argues that this transnational legal process to press our own government to avoid the most negative and damaging features of American exceptionalism. Not to avoid American exceptionalism, there's reason why we feel that we are exceptional. And we are exceptional on many fronts. But we need to avoid the negative and damaging features of it. Okay, so are there any opposing views that he brings up or debunks? You know, I searched and searched and searched. He does not really. Everyone he quotes is someone who is in keeping with his view, you know, who he agrees with, but it's not so much that he disagrees, but he makes their argument, you know what I mean? If he has any issue is that he can make their arguments more solid. He adds stuff. And I'll give you an example. So, I mean, when he talks about the solutions, right? A second counterproductive course is to criticize the critics of American overreaching and to lay the blame on the human rights discourse. So under this view, the human rights era is ending, but human rights advocates fail to recognize that the way they talk about human rights is dated. Okay? So in this particular case, he takes issue with the human rights activists who argue, oh, you know, the human rights era is, you know, I mean, the people who criticize the human rights advocates, okay? So over the decades, America's rhetoric has consistently been human rights oriented and progressive, whereas varied is its willingness to act on this rhetoric in a consistent way that promotes, but I personally could not find any,
So he says,
you know, any instance in the reading where he debunks someone in particular, all right? Not like Coe. Okay, so we're finishing up. So, there's his conclusion, right? And I just snipped the first paragraph of the conclusion, and that's it. Any final questions?
Can we have the slides?
We are recording them on Camtasia, we will post them.
Post?
Yeah, all the slides you saw are being recorded on Camtasia. Unfortunately, they'll be without sound because the microphone doesn't seem to work. Unless, you know, we really get tech savvy and we rip the audio portion of the video and put it in with the slideshow, okay?
Can we cite other sources like you mentioned, like issues with CIA and stuff like that? No citations?
Don't
Just-
do it.
Just
Don't do
the
it, yeah. It gets you in trouble. It gets you in trouble because you start talking about things that may not be relevant,
Oh,
okay? All right, thank you. And good luck. Remember, next week, we are reading draft reviews. We're reading drafts of essays. So if you have something that, and you must have gotten the email we sent out, remember, you can always make an appointment, or we have walk-in hours as well, where you can come in and we can read a draft and give you some feedback, okay? Thanks.